topic for discussion that will include new variant and the urgency of COVID-19 vaccine campaigns. What are the benefits of being vaccinated? How do COVID-19 vaccine work? Are COVID-19 vaccines safe, including vaccine booster? What are the side effects of the COVID-19 vaccine? How long does protection from COVID-19 last? So why COVID-19 vaccine for some people cannot fully protect against variant Delta and Omicron? So do we need to get the booster shot? How does the vaccine boost work? So ladies and gentlemen, I believe by participating in this public lecture, we are in the right place and the right time now. Together, let us accelerate the experience of ideas and good practice in dealing COVID-19, especially on vaccine booster. I encourage all of you to ask any question, make a comment and discussion to get benefit from this valuable public lecture. I'm confident that you will find new ideas, information, knowledge, and fresh energy to keep your health and immune system are in well and optimum condition. I wish you all a very successful public lecture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Asep, for the amazing welcoming speech and encouragement. Glad to hear that you have been fully recovered from COVID-19, sir. It was a pleasure to have you here. In this moment, I would like also to introduce Professor Dr. Usman Sumo Tambunan as the lecturer of the Metabolism course. Professor Usman is currently working as a permanent professor in the chair of bioinformatics and have conducted research on bioinformatics for biomedics for various viruses. His research are supported by the government and Universitas Indonesia. He has finished his bachelor degree in Universitas Indonesia, master degree and doctorate degree in Tohoku University, and PhD in Kansas University, Battle Memorial Institute Columbus, and Wisconsin University. He also has got awarded as the best professor, Satya Lencana and Haniki, or intellectual property rights. In 2020, Professor Usman has posted several publications and gained the intellectual property rights for his inventions. He has been experienced in giving workshops and trainings and also participated in several international conferences and committees. Now, please welcome Professor Usman. Hello, Professor. How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
Glad to hear that. Thank you. So without further ado, Professor, the time and place is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity and welcome to the public lecture 2022. On this occasion, we can gain knowledge from Professor Mohamad, Haniki Mohamad from EEUM. I appreciate Prof. Mohammed who has taken the time to give the public lecture today. I also thank to the audience for the willingness to participate in this public lecture. The world is still immersed in COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 has caused damage to several sectors, and even some sector has suffered severe damage. However, if we compare it to the previous 2 years, it's not that bad anymore. This is the result of the cooperation of various parties. Scientists play a significant role in this. Thanks to the numerous attempts of research on SARS-CoV-2, we have already found several vaccines and drugs that can be used to treat, prevent, and mitigate the damage caused by COVID-19. Vaccination is one of the significant factors in restraining the virus spread. Even though eradicating the virus is almost impossible, we could limit the virus spread. we can only eliminate one virus, that's a smallpox, thanks to the massive vaccination in the area with the highest risk of spreading. The last record smallpox case occurred in Somalia in 1977. That's the only one vaccination. Although the current impact caused by COVID-19 is not as severe as before, we still cannot become without complying with the applicable health protocol. One of the causes in the virus mutation, especially the mutation that occurred in November 2021 in Botswana. The modification in Botswana, known as the Omicron variant, spread rapidly and become the most dominant cause of current COVID-19. The administration of complete vaccine and a booster vaccine shows good sign in dealing with the Omicron variant. Based on many studies that have been done previously, it appears that the number of hospitalizations due to COVID-19. Previous research has also shown that we can reduce the risk of contracting the Omicron variant by giving a booster vaccine. Cooperation from various sectors or various parties is needed in the COVID-19 pandemic, including all of us that joining the public letter this morning. One of the things that people can do is to accept booster vaccine. Booster vaccine provide more benefit to society, although there are indications of side effects in some reports. The problem of this booster sometimes completely make us confused about, but I have to say that I got the report from United States, then United States will prepare their people to get or to have a second booster. In that case, we have to think many times, how about Indonesia and how about country Malaysia, Singapore, and other countries. I think that's all for me from right now. Thank you so much. Enjoy the public lecture and enjoy your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Usman, for the impressive speech. We are so glad to have you here with us. Next, I will introduce Muhammad Alif Abdullah as the moderator of this event. Alif is a penultimate student in undergraduate chemistry, Universitas Indonesia, with interest in biochemistry and inorganic chemistry. He is skilled in public speaking, resource management, crisis management, and conflict resolution. The next session will be guided by our moderator. So Alif, the time and place is yours.
Thank you very much for handing the control over to me, Valen. Right. First of all, I would like to thank everyone here and the audience for joining us in this public lecture today. Okay, so hello, check. Is my voice connected? I'm sorry.
Yes, we can
Yes,
hear
you're
you.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. Right. I'll start over again. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. I'm Alif, the moderator for today's public lecture. First of all, I would like to give my thanks to the audience for joining us on today's public lecture with the main topic, can the booster vaccine of COVID-19 help to avoid another wave? To help explain today's main topic, wave is a surge or increase of COVID-19 cases, usually coming after a mutation of the virus, like the one that Prof. Usman has said about Omicron, or a relaxation of social distancing laws, like the one President Joko Widodo just did earlier this week, allowing people to take off their masks in public places. So this public lecture aims to first give explanation about what is a vaccine booster and the differences between vaccines and boosters. Second is to give an overview on how vaccine boosters help prevent another wave. The third is to educate people on why it is important to take vaccine boosters. The fourth is to explain the safety or risk of boosters and the subsequent side effects. The fifth is to educate people on how to prevent another pandemic and what can we do when another pandemic like COVID hits. So please pay attention and listen closely to this lecture that will be given by Professor Mohamad Haniki bin Mohamed. Okay, so good morning, Professor. How are you, Professor?
Good morning. Assalamualaikum. Alhamdulillah, I'm fine.
Walaikum salam. Yeah. Okay. Professor Haniki, are you looking forward to giving this lecture? Because I was excited all this week to listen to your lecture.
Inshallah, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for the kind invitation.
Okay, incredible. So next, I'll introduce you to the audience so they can better know you. Okay. So Professor Mohamad Haniki bin Mohamed is an expert in the field of pharmacy. He first completed his bachelor's degree in pharmacy in Universitas, Malaysia back in 1993 and has a PhD in pharmacy from the University of Tennessee, USA back in 1996. Currently, he is the president of the Malaysian Association of Adolescent Health and is a professor in the Kuliah Pharmacy International Islamic University, Malaysia, with almost 10 years of experience as a professor there, and was once the head of Kuliah of Pharmacy from January 2019 to July of 2021. At the Kuliah of Pharmacy, Professor Mohamad Haniki teaches body system and therapeutics in MSK systems and sensory organ, GIT and hepatobiliary systems, and central nervous systems back in 2021. He has two ongoing research projects. First is the evaluation of impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on hospital-acquired infections and antimicrobial utilization among hospitalized patients from the start of the pandemic, 2020, to present day. The second is translating evidence towards tobacco control policy from 2017 to present. In the realm of today's topic of vaccines and boosters, he has published an article titled, "Are Vaccines Halal? COVID-19 Vaccines and Vaccination for Preservation of Life," back in 2021. So next is the speaker session. I would like to ask Prof. Haniki to deliver his lecture, and if the audience has a question regarding the lecture, please wait until the question and answer session at the end of the lecture. So without further ado, Professor Haniki, time and place is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator, for the kind introduction. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning to all respected head of chemistry department, Universitas Indonesia, the project coordinator, Ms. Chantika, Prof. Dr. Usman, ladies and gentlemen. As I mentioned earlier, it's indeed a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you for the kind invitation. I hope to be able to address the issues raised just now, but I will try to highlight some of the purpose of the public lecture as we go along. I'll be concentrating mostly on the evidence on the booster doses for COVID-19 vaccines, and we're going to discuss some considerations for future additional doses. As mentioned just now and elaborated by Prof. Dr. Usman, that we have seen the surge of the COVID-19 pandemic, and now some countries have moved into the endemic stage. Malaysia is one of those countries. We are in the phase of moving to the endemic phase, and we have seen a reduction in new cases over the few months after we have reached the target immunization rate. However, we know that real-world studies have shown that the vaccine that were previously given has actually reduced in terms of effectiveness. So the waning of the vaccine effectiveness against the post-SARS-CoV-2 infection, which was the first type of virus associated with causing the COVID-19 pandemic, and also the COVID-19 related hospitalization, in about 2.5 months. Yeah, 2.5 months after the first booster dose of COVID-19 mRNA vaccine like the Pfizer BioNTech. And we know that with the emergence of the SARS-CoV-2 Omicron variant, there has been more issues regarding the vaccine effectiveness. If you asked me just now to define vaccine and booster, so in short, in a very simplified manner, just to say that the initial doses that were determined from clinical trials to be effective to induce the antibodies sufficient to control the pandemic at the time were considered as vaccines. And we know there are many types of vaccines, whether you use the spike protein like the mRNA vaccine for Pfizer, or you use live attenuated virus vaccine or other types. So we have so many types of vaccines in the market, and they have been approved due to the study from clinical trials that involve millions of people all around the world in many different, categories, whether they are young, very young, children, and elderly, immunocompromised, or immunocompetent. So we looked at the response in terms of antibody, and I think by now everybody is well versed regarding the production of antibodies from vaccine, and the production of these antibodies due to stimulation from the vaccine. It warrants protection when we are infected by the virus, because the body already recognized it through the administration of vaccines that were prior given before getting infected. So with that in mind and understanding, and then the concept that there's a reduction in the vaccine effectiveness, so countries have looked at ways to increase back the level of protection by giving booster doses. So meaning that you can give a similar vaccine, the same or similar, by the homologous or heterologous, meaning that, for example, if you were previously given vaccines of the mRNA type, you can get vaccines from other types. So it means that you're getting heterologous rather than the similar vaccines. There are variabilities in terms of vaccine effectiveness, as you know from studies, looking at the ability to confer protection and also antibody titers. So it can range from 60% to more than 90%, depending on the type of vaccines used. So with similar concept, the studies have looked at if you give a booster dose, whether it's the mRNA type or other types, whether that can confer additional benefit by increasing back the vaccine effectiveness by stimulating the body to produce enough antibodies to confer or to combat or to address infections, particularly by different variants of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So beyond that, I can also highlight that some countries have even gone from third doses to considered second booster to fourth dose, fourth vaccine dose. So it's a second booster dose. So studies are going on looking at this. In certain population, for example, immunocompromised, whether they have for example, depressed immune systems due to diseases like cancers or taking immunosuppressive agents or other diseases, even like diabetes or cardiovascular disease, that would warrant reduction in the ability of the body to respond to infections. So in the older and immunocompromised individuals who are at higher risk of severe disease, hospitalization, and even death from being infected from COVID-19, the practice of giving booster doses done. it's not yet maybe cost effective at this juncture to say that everybody should be getting a booster dose. I've only got my first booster after my 2 doses of vaccinations. So I'm not yet eligible to say because they're only opening in Malaysia, at least the subsequent booster doses to those who are 60 or 65 years old and older, or those with diseases that put them at the higher risk of getting more severe disease or hospitalization and even death if they are to be infected. So we need to categorize the booster dose in terms of purpose. There are 2 main scenarios that we have that would warrant the recommendation of getting booster doses would be based on the assessment whether the use of the additional booster doses in patients or people who are not able to mount and sustain adequate immune responses for various reasons. Sometimes the intra-individual variability, that the ability of a person compared to another in responding to the vaccines can be different. So the amount of antibodies that's produced from the vaccine and also from the ability to protect from actual infection can differ. Now, is it easy to identify people who do not produce adequate immune responses? I guess depending on the resources of the country. In some countries, they may have enough financial resources to test and retest many individuals, but most countries, they look at the second scenario, which is to protect high-risk populations and also the frontliners or the healthcare workers, so that we can maintain the health system during the periodic waves of disease surges. We do not know, God forbid, that we're going to have subsequent waves of the COVID-19 pandemic, but we have to be realistic. We have seen the emergence of variants of Omicron, and we know the infectivity of Omicron. And due to the comprehensive immunization system using vaccines for COVID-19, the severity of people getting infected with Omicron, alhamdulillah, thank God, is less. And as what one would imagine if we did not reach enough coverage or quickly with our initial vaccination program, what would happen? Yeah? What we can imagine what would happen if suddenly Omicron hit us and then we were not able to adequately vaccinate our populations. So we're going to be hit more severely, and the healthcare system would probably collapse. But alhamdulillah, with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God Almighty, the effectiveness of the vaccines previously administered to the population conferred, quote unquote, herd immunity. I'm sure you are well versed with this concept, that if you vaccinate enough people in the community, you would protect even those who were not yet vaccinated, because the infection would be much suppressed or less to be transmitted due to enough coverage of vaccination. So we hope to see the same if we were to learn from the previous experience. So the issue of protecting those high-risk populations and the healthcare worker with booster doses of the vaccines are being practiced. So let's look into the scenarios. So if we look at booster doses, which offered based on evidence that doing so would have substantial impact on reducing hospitalization, severe disease, and death, and definitely to protect the healthcare system from collapsing, as I mentioned earlier. So in order to, the order of implementing booster doses to different population groups should follow that which has been laid by the primary vaccination series. For example, the booster doses should be prioritized for the higher priority use groups before the lower priority use groups, unless there is enough justification not to do so. But most countries are doing this because it's the logical thing to do. And such justification should include pragmatic constraints or acceptability obstacles to uptake in the higher priority use groups that would either then result in vaccine wastage. We still have to struggle with vaccine hesitancy. That's another term which I'm sure you have heard before and you understand it well. For whatever reasons, people refuse to be vaccinated. That's why our team was quickly consulted to write articles regarding the halal or the permissibility of vaccine among Muslims, because they were very concerned regarding the use of animal cell lines, particularly those which are non-halal sources of porcine-based cell lines. But we, in the pharmaceutical industry and in the pharmacy areas, can explain well, and I'm sure you can also explain well regarding the chemical changes from the original source to the finished products due to the processes of production of the vaccines themselves, that there is no similarities between the original or the components or the chemicals from the cell lines to the finished products. And also we have this concept of darura or emergency or urgent needs, whereby the supposedly all halal or all plant-based vaccines are not available. So it's permissible for the time being until we have an alternative that's considered fully halal, or then there would be no issue. That's just highlighting one issue on the halalness of the product. As mentioned just now, we also have issues regarding safety. There were a lot of misinformation, disinformation, regarding vaccine safety due to the fact that it is new, right? So anything new, we do not know much about it other than the safety and efficacy data that were obtained and reported during the clinical trials. So you have preclinical trials and also clinical trials. So what people are saying is that due to the speed of vaccines production and testing and the approval as it enters the market, people are skeptical regarding the long-term safety, definitely. But data have shown that they are definitely safer than getting infected from COVID-19. And when the head of the chemistry department just now shared his personal experience being infected and reinfected with the Omicron variant, so that it goes to show that when you have been vaccinated and then if you get the booster dose especially, and even if you get infected, your degree or your severity will be much less as compared to what you get if you were unvaccinated or didn't get any booster dose. So whatever side effects of vaccines can be mild, can be moderate. In some people, it can be severe that led to anaphylactic reaction. So that's a very small population of the world. So we do not have the ability to use in those population because it's true allergic reactions. to the vaccines in terms of the components or any constituents. But by and large, the population who receive vaccinations and data from post-marketing surveillance, i.e. Data after that's collected in all countries, because they have the surveillance, what we call as pharmacovigilance. The health authority has in place what we call this monitoring bodies that collect data regarding side effects or adverse effects of vaccines administered to each individual, and those data are then collected and will become a country data, and then it will become a global data. The companies, the pharmaceutical companies, are of course also doing rigorous monitoring of pharmacovigilance on top of each country's work on this aspect. So let's go to the other slides. So we can safely say that within a given priority age group, primary series vaccinations will have greater impact per dose than additional doses. So we always give one dose first and then see what would happen in this group as time goes on. And across priority use groups, the benefit of additional doses for the higher priority use groups versus the primary series doses for the lower priority use groups actually depends on country's condition, whether they can supply it, whether they have the enough supply and roll out in time. That is the distribution. Remember, vaccines would require cold chain distribution. It needs to be a specific temperature, definitely low temperature, in order to maintain its effectiveness, okay? As much as possible to the standard of the clinical trials. But when in the real world situation, we have issues with distributions, yeah, timely distributions, and in accordance with the cold chain requirements, yeah. So what about other factors? Past epidemic dynamics in the country, and also infection-induced immunity, the vaccine products themselves, the vaccine effectiveness, and also how much the protection actually is reduced or waned after the administration of the vaccines. When high primary series coverage rates have been achieved among the subgroups at higher risk of severe disease and death, for example, the older populations, as I mentioned, the additional doses for the subgroups may actually give higher reductions in severe disease and death than the use of equivalent vaccine supply for primary series vaccination of lower priority use group. So this statement means that we can give booster for these subgroups which are at higher risk, yeah, from severe disease and death from COVID-19. And as I mentioned, one of the groups would be the older adults, because the production of antibodies in older adults have been shown to be less as compared to younger ones. This is normal physiologic condition, yeah. Okay. There was raised what's the optimal interval between completion of the primary series. So for example, you have received the 2 doses of your mRNA vaccines, just like what happened to me, or what happened to the respected head of the chemistry department just now. So once the primary series have been completed, what's the best time to give additional doses? Okay, it is assumed to be around 4 to 6 months, yeah, from data available up to now. It's not yet to be determined specifically. We can say at 5 months, at 4.5, 5.5, don't know yet. But the range is 4 to 6 months after the primary series of vaccination. But there are also other factors that need to be considered. The epidemiological setting, the vaccine products, the targeted age group, and then the background seroprevalence, circulation, and frequency of specific variants of concerns. So if that country has a high spread, high prevalence of Omicron, and who knows what next to come in the future, so then you may cut the interval shorter in order to boost up the antibody production in the general population. But with current data, especially in the context of Omicron issue that we have seen, an interval of 4 to 6 months after the completion of the primary series could be considered. From data available and also report posted at the WHO website, booster doses should be considered for all COVID-19 vaccines having received their emergency use listing or EUL as per the product-specific interim recommendation. So we need to be constantly looking at what the WHO updates us in its website or through the media regarding booster doses. Okay, and in the second scenario, additional doses in immunocompromised people, the available data for the WHO emergency use listings of COVID-19 vaccine products suggest that vaccine effectiveness or VE and immunogenicity are lower in immunocompromised people compared to people who are immunocompetent. Thus, an additional dose included in the extended primary series enhances immune response in some of these immunocompromised persons. And given the significant risk of severe COVID-19 for this population, if they get infected, the WHO has already issued a recommendation for an extended primary series, which is a third dose, and then another dose as a booster. So for immunocompromised population, their regimen is slightly different. They have, for example, a third dose in the regimen itself. And on top of that, they will get a booster dose as the fourth dose for this population for all COVID-19 vaccines. This is based from data and reports from the WHO as listed here. I mentioned about homologous versus heterologous. So I hope these terms are understandable, but it's very simple. It means that homologous, you're using the same vaccine throughout the regimen or the series, or heterologous, you mix different types of vaccines for the patient. And studies have shown that you can use either one. You can use homologous, you can use also heterologous for booster doses purposes. So this actually helped a lot because sometimes due to production, due to availability, accessibility of the vaccines, you may not have the same vaccines throughout to be given to the population from the primary series to the booster doses. Okay, so consideration, doses beyond the first dose within 6 months of the first booster. So additional booster doses after the first booster are currently being offered in some countries. As I mentioned, the fourth dose to older adults, and also a fifth dose for immunocompromised persons. So this is another booster, the second booster. So the data on the usefulness of these additional booster doses is actually limited, and especially on the duration of further protection. If I'm not mistaken, until this month, data that we have only exists for the mRNA, the BioNTech vaccines, the Pfizer vaccines. So we have not seen data on additional booster doses for other types of vaccines. So I'm sure given time, we'll get more data from other types of vaccine as well. What data do we have? Right now, we have 7 studies which were available for review. because health is a very evidence-based practice. So we look at data, although people always say the statement, in Allah or God Almighty we trust, in others we need data. So the data that we have regarding boosters actually from 7 studies, which 6 of them from Israel and 1 from Canada. Israel has been very vigorous and in the front for vaccine used from the very beginning. And all the 7 studies were conducted during the time when Omicron has been predominant, circulating globally. Okay, and while most studies vary in the design and population investigated, most studies actually evaluated the relative effectiveness of a 4th dose at 4 months after the 3rd dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech or the mRNA vaccine, and compare that to those who only received 3 doses. Okay. So the relative vaccine, let me see this. Starting off, okay. Let me reduce it a bit. Okay. The relative vaccine effectiveness of VE only provides evidence on the value of the 4th dose compared to individuals who receive their 3rd dose. Okay, and the VE actually depends upon the initial vaccine effectiveness that were provided by the previous 3 doses, and then how much subsequent waning or reduction has occurred. This is a concept that I mentioned earlier, that once you administer vaccine, then you need to consider the reduction in this protectiveness due to the amount of antibody that can be produced over time after the vaccine has been administered. Okay. But earlier studies actually provide absolute vaccine effectiveness comparing individuals who were vaccinated versus unvaccinated. Of course, during the time when we still have people who refused or were not yet vaccinated, so we can compare the data in terms of absolute vaccine effectiveness when the population still available. Yeah, population who are unvaccinated are still available. But in countries where vaccination rate has reached more than 80 or 90% coverage, so it's more difficult to get data comparing to compare vaccinated versus unvaccinated individual. The only study that we have that did this is the Canadian study. Okay. Maybe because it's a big country and coverage is difficult or whatever reasons, that data on unvaccinated individuals were available. Okay, so it compares 4th dose schedule to those who were unvaccinated. Okay, and last but not least, the point that we need to highlight from available data from studies, that the maximum follow-up from the studies are considered short, and it ranged from 2 weeks to 10 weeks after the 4th dose. Okay. Out of the studies available that investigated the 4th dose of mRNA COVID vaccine, the 2 reported studies are actually specific on outcomes of infections and any symptomatic disease. Okay. And both of the studies were from Israel, and they included health workers as their population of interest. Yeah, this is a very logical thing to do. As I mentioned, we want to protect our healthcare workers, our frontliners. So one studies actually showed an increase in the immunoglobulin G antibodies against SARS-CoV-2 receptor binding domain and the neutralizing antibody titers by a factor of 9 to 10. So this is high, yeah, as you can imagine. So this provides strong evidence that once you give a booster dose, okay, and measured immunologically through the IgG antibodies and the neutralizing antibody titers, which actually increased by a factor of 9 to 10-fold after the 4th dose of vaccines. So this is slightly higher than those achieved after the 3rd dose. So it shows that you can still increase the ability to protect after you give a booster dose as compared to when you give the 3rd dose. And there's no significant difference between the 2 mRNA vaccines. So this is the this supports the earlier statement by the WHO that you can still use homologous vaccine as a booster dose. So either you give, when you give the 2 mRNA vaccines, you can still see there's no significant difference. The 2nd dose investigated the breakthrough infection in healthcare workers who received 3rd dose of the Pfizer mRNA, the mRNA vaccine, and provided comparison with those who received a 4th dose. So it was shown that in the 4th dose recipients, there was a reduction in breakthrough in the infection rates compared to observed for those who received 3 doses of the mRNA vaccine. So another point that supports the recommendation of a booster dose. Okay, and those are the 2 studies. So I said earlier there were 7 studies. So the remaining 5 studies, they were conducted in individuals more than 60 years of age. So the elderly, but excluding individuals who had previous SARS-CoV-2 infection, and specifically evaluated only mRNA vaccines. Okay, 2 of the studies were retrospective using administrative data. So the first of these 2 retrospective studies found that the relative vaccine effectiveness against severe disease was to be around 66% for the 15 to 21 days after the 4th dose, and it increased to 77%, 36 to 42 days after the 4th dose. So it means that the vaccine effectiveness increased as time goes on. Okay, so that's why the window period of 4 to 6 months was still considered useful. And the second retrospective study reported on death as the outcome measure and found a relative vaccine effectiveness of 78% after 7 or more days after the 4th dose. And this absolute risk reduction was 0.07%. You may say, oh, 0.70%, that's low. But this is absolute risk reduction. And remember, if we're talking on the population, a global population base, this is huge. Yeah. A 3rd study actually used a test negative design and reported on severe disease. They found a relative vaccine effectiveness of 87%, 49 to 69 days post 4th booster. And this study reported the severe disease was actually a rare event occurring in less than 1% of both 4th dose and 3rd dose only recipients. So it gives the impression that once you have received a 3rd dose, then severe disease already rare. What more if you give additional protection by giving a 4th dose? Okay, the 4th study actually reviewed was a target trial where it applied the trial design principle from randomized control trial. I'm not sure you are aware of the level or hierarchy of trials, but for example, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial is considered the best type of clinical trial, where, for example, the administrators or the researchers would be blinded, and not the researchers, sorry, the administrators, the people who give the vaccine, and the recipients, the individuals were didn't know whether they're getting vaccines or inactive or placebo. Only the researchers who are collecting data would later break the blinding for analysis. Then they would only reveal whether the results are different from people who receive the vaccination booster dose versus those who did not. Okay, so randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials. When you see these RCTs, it means it's the best design of clinical trial. Okay, so but the if we cannot always have this. So sometimes we go for analysis of observational data, which means that what happens in the field, what happens in the real world, on the ground, once we have started administering the vaccines. Okay, so we look at the target trial data and provided outcome data for hospitalization, severe death, severe disease, and death. They found a relative vaccine effectiveness of 62% against severe COVID-19, 74% against COVID-19 related death, comparing third to fourth dose recipients. So another great finding to support the booster dose administration. And they further analyzed the risk of severe COVID-19 from the 7 days to 30 days post fourth dose, and there was 42 events per 100,000 individuals as compared to 110 events for 100,000 individuals in the third dose recipient. So this actually corresponds to a difference in risk of 68 cases every 100,000%. So is it huge? Yes, every life matters. What more in the elderly population? Okay. Okay, the study that I mentioned in Canada, when you have unvaccinated population, so not only relative vaccine effectiveness, but then also absolute vaccine effectiveness, comparing 2 doses recipient as well as 3 doses recipient, and they found that with each additional dose given, the vaccine effectiveness increased for the severe disease. So absolute vaccine effectiveness was 82% as measured more than 84 days after the third dose, and 92% for the fourth dose recipient greater than 7 days to the fourth after the fourth dose. So this is very, very high. Taken together, all the studies show some short-term benefit of additional booster dose of the mRNA vaccine in the healthcare workers, and also those over 16 years old with immunocompromising condition. So data support an additional dose for healthy younger population are actually currently limited, and data suggests that in younger people the benefit is minimal. That's why it was mentioned just now that it's not common, not yet made compulsory or highly recommended in younger population or in children. So therefore, we need more data on this. Okay, also take into consideration the follow-up time after the additional booster dose is still considered limited. So we cannot make conclusions on the duration of protection after the booster dose for this current time. So we need more follow-up data on this protection after additional booster dose. Yeah. Okay. So there is a lack of data to guide some important questions for policy decision making. So some countries are still waiting for more data before they make it a recommendation for the population to be getting the booster dose, third or fourth dose. So, but the limited available data suggests that for the higher risk group, the benefit supports the administration of additional booster dose. So in health, we always talk about risk versus benefit. I've talked about the side effects just now, even from primary vaccine. We found that the benefits outweigh is more than the risk. Majority of the people reported mild to moderate. And although now we have reports that increase of hepatitis in children, but the causal relationship has not yet been established. So we cannot say for sure this is vaccine induced or related until we can finalize the data and found causal relationship as a significant cause of the side effects. Okay, so administering an additional dose will likely come with considerable programmatic challenges in terms of the vaccine delivery in many settings. So we realize this cannot be done for all countries. There's the financial and opportunity cost of such program that need to be considered and weigh against limited incremental benefit of additional booster dose. But in those most at risk or for severe disease of death, or those who are not able to provide full immune response, the additional benefit of a booster dose of mRNA vaccine, because right now we only have data for the mRNA vaccine, might be warranted. This is the WHO recommendation and the take-home message from this public lecture. Okay, so for now, the data that we have, booster dose is warranted for those who are at risk of severe disease or death. This include the elderly and those with immunocompromised individuals who are not able to mount a full immune response. Okay, further consideration in the future, there are significant uncertainties related to the evolution of the virus. We know the mutation goes on, and whatever variant would come in the future would have to be dealt with accordingly. Okay. For example, given the widespread transmission of Omicron globally, continued viral evolution, with the emergence of new variants or sublineages is already being seen. Also, development of pan-SARS-CoV-2 or pan-sarbecovirus vaccines are needed, but the time frame is uncertain. Sarbecovirus subgenus actually include SARS-CoV-1 and 2. So we need to test vaccines against the sarbecovirus as well. Okay. The composition of the currently available COVID-19 vaccines also need to be updated to offer better protection against the new variants of concerns, which can be antigenically distinct or different than the existing ones. We do not know. Current vaccines are based on the index virus, appear to maintain high vaccine effectiveness against severe disease, also in the context of current variants of concern, but vaccine effectiveness estimates against infection and symptomatic diseases are lower against Omicron, for example. So if we have new variants in the future, they can also be less, yeah, in terms of vaccine effectiveness. So any update to vaccine composition would aim to elicit greater breadth or coverage in the immune response against circulating and emerging variants, in addition to retaining protection against severe death and disease. The performance of any updated vaccine or vaccines may vary depending on the nature and magnitude of previously acquired immunity, recognizing that the immunity will be dependent on different variants of concerns, type of vaccine, and the timing of administration. So all these factors need to be taken into considerations. Okay, let me escape. Okay. Data will continuously be generated as time goes on regarding the performance of the current and variant-specific candidate COVID-19 vaccines, including the vaccine effectiveness, immunogenicity, and safety of additional booster dose over time and disease outcome, and the priority use groups. Okay. So we need more research on the breadth, magnitude, and durability of humoral and also cell-mediated immune responses to the variants. As you know, there are two types of immunity, mediated immune response, which is humoral and cell-mediated. So we need to research more on this to see the magnitude, durability, and the breadth or the coverage of the responses. We need evidence to address other gaps regarding the need for additional booster doses, duration for the vaccine effectiveness of the inactivated subunit, and also viral vector vaccines, meaning that for different types of vaccine, because I mentioned earlier, all the data that we have are from using the mRNA vaccine. Okay, and understanding of the vaccine correlates of protection and correlates of durability of protection in persons with or without previous COVID-19 infection would assist policymakers in creating sound programmatic decision. As mentioned earlier, even when you have had Omicron infection after your doses, even booster doses. So whether the country would include this as a program decision or not would depend on various factors. So these are the references for my talk, and I thank you so much for your attentive listening and kind invitation. With that, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. Haniki, for the great and enlightening lecture. Now, to quickly summarize the general points of the lecture. So first of all, vaccines do work on reducing the severity or number of infections. So the booster shots should be prioritized for high-risk groups, such as people in the healthcare workers and people with weak or compromised immune systems. This is supported by the World Health Organization, who has recommended people with weak or compromised immune systems, such as the elderly, that they may need more booster shots. Also, data from limited studies does show a decrease in infection probability after a booster shot, but it is suggested that the effect is minimum on younger people. So, TLDR, people with weak or compromised immune systems and high-risk individuals should take the booster. Also, a pan-COVID vaccine or drug needs to be developed that works on a wide or even all of the lineages of the coronavirus with high effectivity. So there needs to be more research and work on this sector. So that is my summary of the lecture. Now we will move on to the next part, which is the questions and answer session. If any of the audience has a question, please feel free to introduce yourself and ask. You can open your mic or write in the chat. So this section will be divided into two parts. Each part has two questions. So ask before someone else takes the chance. Go on to ask trigger questions sort of. So needed to achieve herd immunity, because at the first part of the lecture, you said we need to achieve herd immunity against COVID. What do you think is the magic number, so to say, wherein enough people have been vaccinated to basically eradicate COVID from
Thank you. That was a very good question and highly debatable, because what we don't have a magic number. We previously aimed for 80% of the population, but with the evolving of the landscape, we know that even with 80%, we cannot get herd immunity due to the confounding variables like the emergence of new variants of concerns. So it was a good target to put initially 80%. If you have to plug a number when we talk about herd immunity, but in real life situation, and we realized that herd immunity is a concept, but we don't, how do I say, adhere to this number for the management of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay,
There's a
so
question from Jovel and Priya. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Jovel.
Okay, thank you for the chance. Thank you from Mohamad. I want to ask a question regarding to booster vaccine. One of my concern is that vaccine doesn't necessarily means that we are completely immune from COVID. And even if we are immune from one type of COVID, we know that COVID have frequent mutation like from Omicron, Delta, and other variant of COVID. The question that I really want to know is that if in one case that a person who survived all kind of COVID meaning that from the very first COVID until the most recent COVID case or most recent COVID mutation, he got infected with all of them and survived all of them. Does it still important for the person to receive a booster vaccine since we know that usually after that person survive after being infected with that COVID, all of the COVID variant, they will have a T-cell memory which will give response in if another similar type of virus infect that person again. So that's it necessarily important for the person who survived all of that COVID variant to take vaccine, or as recently now vaccine booster. Maybe since that person already take the first and the second vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a very relevant question. It's broken into several parts. For example, if you have been infected with different types of variants of COVID-19, would you still need the booster dose? Again, I cannot say or predict the future, but data for now only supports the administration of vaccine if the person is considered healthcare worker, immunocompromised, elderly above 60. Because we know, but by getting the infection, yes, you can produce antibodies, as I mentioned, through humoral and also cell mediated. Your cell will have the memory, the T cell memory, and then you can produce antibody. The question is it enough? Okay, the antibody titers to neutralize it, is it enough, the production? Or do you need more cells to produce it prior to getting more infection? So in terms of immunogenicity, neutralizing abilities, the circulating antibodies would all have to be measured for this kind of individuals. But again, as I said, the practicality of it, whether you can measure it in all individuals, is definitely not cost effective at this juncture. So, for example, even if you have been infected, and as you know, the reason that you, the main contributing reason that you you survive, other than maybe proper management and Allah, the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is God's will that you survive after being repeatedly infected by various variants of COVID-19, that you would produce some sort of antibody and your body would remember. But as mentioned just now, even when we got the initial vaccines for the primary vaccines, again, the Beta, the Delta variant, and then came Omicron, we saw that the protection is still good. Even though we have new variants, we still provide enough antibodies to prevent more severe disease or infection, hospitalization, complications, and lastly, death. So that's the same concept applied in this scenario. To answer your questions in brief, that we still consider it for future use, but for now, we only have data for specific groups. So you have to look into the risk versus benefits, again, definitely. But what's the risk for the individual to keep on being infected by various strains of COVID-19? So most likely healthcare workers, immunocompromised or elderly. So they would fall into the group that has been studied where data supports the giving of booster dose for these populations. But if they're young, there's something going on, there's something else. Maybe, as I've said, there could be some individual variability in their ability to produce antibody. So they have lack of protection and therefore getting infected more than other people of the same category. So, but until we get data for this special group, we cannot yet recommend booster dose for now.
Thank you so much for the answer, Prof. Haniki. It's very, very clear and easy to understand. I'll give it back to Muhammad Alif. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jovel, for the interesting question, and also Prof. Haniki for the answer as well. Now, carrying on, is there any other question from the audience? There is one more slot in this session. Then we can move on to the next Q&A session.
Okay, Mr. Moderator, can I talk with Prof. Haniki?
Oh, yes, go ahead, Professor Usman.
Prof. Mohamad.
Yes, Prof.
Can you share some experience that you have already in your country? I have two questions for you in case of discussing this vaccine. Did the people of Malaysia check the titer of antibody after they got vaccination? And the second one, did the people of Malaysia use Sinovac vaccine in your country? Thank you. The two questions should be, I think, previous question.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you for the question. For the first question, it's not a routine practice to check our antibody titer post-vaccination outside of clinical trial environment. So in Malaysia, some of our subjects, some of our citizens were subject to clinical trials of vaccines. So in those subjects, we got data of the antibody titer production, the level, and the increase in the level post-vaccination. But for the general population, I would assume this is mainly due to cost. And since we already have data that the vaccination worked in population representing Malaysians, so we don't need additional study at the moment to look into the level of antibodies production. On the second question, yes, Sinovac has been used and still currently used, as well as other types of vaccines, because in Malaysia, as I think most countries, we use whatever available to us, whatever that we can get our hands on, because it's a vigorous bidding process in the beginning and still going on, I believe, until and unless the country can produce its own vaccines. But there's work on it, and I believe that some of at least one type of vaccine is being produced locally, or not 100% produced, more like from the filling part is done locally. So yes, we use Sinovac as well in our country.
For booster itself, you mentioned before that it's homologous and heterogeneous. But how in our country, for example, the people got first Sinovac. Did your country approve them to use Sinovac also for booster?
Oh, right now, based on the data, we only have the Pfizer mRNA dose, because the data only use the Pfizer mRNA. So we have to adhere to the WHO recommendation to use this vaccine at the moment. But in theory, we know that when you mix vaccines, even for the primary vaccination, it still confers protection. It actually, and studies have shown that you can do heterologous vaccination for the primary series. For the booster, as I said, we only have data for the mRNA.
As far as I know that, for example, Australia, if you have booster Sinovac, then you go to Australia. They did not receive that one. You should use.
Oh, this is country specific, bro.
Yeah,
this is country specific.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, Malaysia, no.
Because you are a neighbor. Because
we have Pfizer. We have Pfizer's. We have Pfizer BioNTech vaccine.
Yeah, but it's difficult for us to explain to the people or to the student the mechanism of how can I say increasing the antibody titer in our body after getting the booster, right? Just try and error or do the research and get the data. But it's difficult for us to explain to the student how come that this one can increase our body antibody titer. Do you agree with about that one?
Depends. The students here a bit able to understand what I've been sharing. I hope they do. It's like when you talk about your hepatitis B vaccination, you need to have booster doses. Do you remember? If you get the Hep B as a healthcare worker, you need to get booster dose in order to increase your antibody production and protection against Hep B. So it's the same concept. It's like a top up for your
because
data.
My is very tough because sometimes they ask me about that one, and I told them we need data. We need.
Oh yes, I agree with you.
That one.
I agree with you.
To ask about the
Yeah. So for now we have at least the 7 studies, and from those studies the WHO made the recommendation. As I've said, it's not compulsory. That is not made compulsory by the WHO to give booster doses to all. They target the immunocompromised, the elderly, and the healthcare workers, and therefore they make the statement that this is recommended. It's not yet considered as compulsory. Even in Malaysia, not all healthcare workers receiving their booster dose is highly recommended. So most of them are. Some of my friends who are 60 years old and above are already getting booster doses as well.
So you agree with me that data is everything, and data is capital of our country, right?
Sorry, Prof?
That data is everything. Data is a capital.
Yes.
Because in this case, should change our mind to be digitalization.
Yes, that's what I shared. In Allah we trust, in others we need data.
Yeah, okay. Oh, thank you, Ms. Amarat. Thank you. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the interesting discussion from Professor Usman, and also thank you, Professor Haniki, for the answers. Okay, so we will now go on to the second session of the questions and answer session. So if any of the audience has a question, please introduce themselves, and also whether open your mic by raising your hand or typing in the chat. I will be happy to read your questions. If you can't open your mic or are too embarrassed to do so, I will be happy to read your questions from the chat. Please ask away.
I think no need to be embarrassed, isn't it?
To fill up the time, actually, Professor Haniki, I have a question. Also, what is
Yes.
your take on the booster shot regarding people with odd medical conditions? Because I've read that the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, can cause complications with people suffering from Guillain-Barre syndrome, I believe the name, GBS. Yes. What is your take on that? Should people with GBS or other related illnesses take the booster if they're high risk or are elderly?
Thank you for the question. For this population, because we don't want to give certain types of vaccines, definitely not the live attenuated vaccines. So we try to avoid vaccinations of this kind in patients with GBS. But having said that, this is where the value of the quote unquote herd immunity comes in. We vaccinate other people in the community to protect those who cannot receive vaccination. Similarly, we would not give booster doses to this population. As I've said in one of the slides, that we do not know about specific marginalized population who we don't have data on them until and unless studies are performed specifically for this type of population, then only we can make our recommendation. So for now, the easiest way of answering that question is no, and it might change, who knows when, until we have the data.
Thank you very much, Prof. So that just gives another reason for people to get vaccinated, yes? So we can help other people that cannot get the booster or the vaccine because of some health-related issue. Actually, one of my friend's mother has an autoimmune disease, and until now, she is incredibly high risk because she hasn't been vaccinated because of that autoimmune disorder. She could literally die from having even the mRNA, from an mRNA vaccine. It's a very rare autoimmune disorder. So please get vaccinated, everyone.
Indeed, I agree with you. So our roles is to protect ourselves and our community.
Okay, again, I ask the audience if any of you have a question, please feel free to open your mic or write in the chat. I will read it out for you to Professor Haniki.
I guess they understood my lecture well, so there are no questions. So thank you so much. We'll move on to photo session.
Actually, Professor, one last question, I guess. In the realm of a pan-COVID or pan-coronavirus drug or vaccine, I've read that there are these things called super antibodies. Actually, Professor Usman has made a video about it, of which I actually just learned about this like when I saw Professor Usman's video about super antibodies, which can kind of target all or a wide variety of coronaviruses. Like, how is that different from a normal antibody, like where we get from normal vaccines? So what differs, or are you familiar with this topic?
I think I can speak generally on it, but I think Prof. Usman will be able to elaborate a bit more. In terms of the vaccine production, as I mentioned, the main part which is antigenic is the spike proteins of the coronavirus. If you remember the structure of the coronavirus with all its spikes or the legs, so that's the part where we produce vaccines against. Yeah. Because that they use the spikes to latch on the receptors. Is two subtype receptors on the surface of the lungs of the respiratory tract in order to enter the bloodstream and into the body. So the vaccines produced is then again is using these parts of the virus to elicit the immunoresponse in our body. To produce a pan, what you mentioned, pan SARS-CoV-2 or pan sabicovirus, yes, that would be great. That you have a wide coverage, general coverage that confer protection from, if not all, most of the variants. Yeah, because we know that SARS-CoV-1 and 2 are members of the sabicovirus subgenus. So if you can produce a more general type of vaccine that would confer protection against more general other than more specific, that would be great. Yeah, that would be great. But we need data from, as I mentioned, the double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trials to substantiate these initial findings so that it can be then used for that purpose. So that's my quick response on it, and I look forward to hearing from Prof. Usman.
Okay, thank you very much for the response, Prof. Haniki. Prof. Usman, do you have something to say about this topic? Prof, you're still muted, Prof. Usman.
Okay, my student didn't know exactly about, let's say, like epitope-based vaccine. In case of discussing that one, we can use a multi-epitope vaccine. Then we should see the concept region of the spike that you use to develop the vaccine. Okay, without thinking about that one, so let's say like Sinovac. Sinovac has already mutated, right? For now on, I don't think you can use Sinovac for booster, because in this case, the problem is Sinovac is not there anymore. So you have to use a new, let's say, a variant of a vaccine by using the same platform like a Sinovac, but do not use a Sinovac from, let's say, like original from Wuhan. You have to use others variant from other country. That's the first one. The second one, let's say you can use or approach develop a vaccine by using epitope-based vaccine, multi-epitope vaccine. So in that case, I think that you can use that one and you got the super antibody. That the new approach for that one.
Okay, Prof. So in my understanding, multi-epitope means you use small parts of the virus. Is that correct? Not the whole big spike protein, or what?
Epitope is an amino acid sequence.
Oh, so just a sequence of amino acid, not the whole protein.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have to select from every variant. Then you combine them one and develop the vaccine. So it's
so you recombine the. Yeah. Okay. And I understand a little bit better now. Thank you very much, Prof. Haniki and Prof. Usman, for answering my question. We move on now to Chantika Dewi Anandira. Do you have a question?
Okay, thank you, Mano.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I have some question. Before that, thank you, Prof. Haniki, to give an incredible speaker session. So I have a question about what is the difference between boosters and additional doses for immunocompromised individuals? So that is my question. Thank you.
Prof. Haniki, I'm sorry, you're muted.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I just muted myself, isn't it? So we talked about just now when we say additional doses, meaning that from the regimens of vaccines that has been studied. For example, the single dose, double dose vaccination regimen, right? So then booster is on top of the regimen. If you give booster dose, yeah, booster dose is like an extension of the primary series. So on top of that primary series, then you give another dose. So that is called booster. You can give additional doses in immunocompromised people. For example, you continue the same regimen that previously was given for the primary series. For example, you receive first dose, second dose. Now, for immunocompromised patient, you give third dose. That's additional, right? But once you give another dose that's beyond the regimen for the vaccination, that is called booster. Is okay, Shantika?
Okay, it's understandable.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Shantika, for the question, and Professor Haniki for answering. There is one more slot in this Q&A session, please. If any of the audience...
Professor Haniki, my student got confused about the booster and adjuvant. Can you explain about the two? Adjuvant.
Adjuvant.
Yes.
If we define adjuvant as like supporting, like we give additional support, drugs that supports the, for example, effectiveness of the primary drug or medicine. So this is a common term used in chemotherapy or chemotherapeutics of cancer. So you give adjuvant that help.
Don't you agree with me that one out of the 10 vaccine use adjuvant in the vaccine?
Which vaccine, Prof?
Corona.
Oh, to use an adjuvant.
Adjuvant, yeah.
I don't have data to support that. Unless...
Used to be, I know that adjuvant is the same like booster. But from now on, I got confused to explain to the student what's the difference between these two.
Adjuvant in the primary vaccine.
Adjuvant in the vaccine.
Okay. So adjuvant, as I've said, is to help the effectiveness of the primary constituents. So if you're talking adjuvant to the primary vaccine, it means you add other types of chemicals or materials, to increase, to enhance or increase the effectiveness of the primary chemicals or medicine or drug. That's a general definition of adjuvant. So when we add on the adjuvant in chemicals to the primary vaccine, it means that it helps the effectiveness of the primary vaccine. So that is the term or definition of adjuvant for vaccines.
Because we got confused to explain to the student, right? 1 year ago, after you got the vaccine, you got first dose and a second dose. The doctor told the student that first dose is for to develop memory. So it's about T cell. Then for the second dose is for B cell to develop antibody. But right now you have a booster. What kind of booster that we have? How come that booster can enhance the T cell or B cell? That's the problem of me to explain to the student. So I told them that we need data. Data.
So the data that we have are from the 7 studies that they actually increase antibody titer and also immunization, and that results in the reduction in hospitalization severity and also death. because we have data that compare the effectiveness, the vaccine effectiveness from booster doses in vaccinated, and at least one study that I mentioned from Canada in unvaccinated individuals. So when you compare against unvaccinated individuals, then you have good data of absolute benefit, absolute benefit, rather than you say relatively this is better when you give third doses or booster doses. So when what we have now, as I've said, is enough to recommend in at least certain groups of individuals, not yet for the general population. Because to be able to do that, Prof, as you know, you need a lot of financial resources to test many individuals after they have received their primary vaccine regimen, and what happens to them after they receive a booster dose. So I think it's a good practice if the country would like to research this and study this, but that depends on the financial capability of the country itself. In Malaysia, I have not heard of any studies to look at the vaccine effectiveness for booster doses. So we tend to accept studies from other countries, as mentioned, particularly the data from Israel and Canada. But I guess we hope to get data, as you mentioned, from Australia now, because they're using something different. So this data sharing is definitely wonderful, because that's the way that we actually manage to handle the pandemic as well. Countries are willing to share data from their own experience in terms of using various types of vaccines. So if the Indonesia want to lead the way, that will be good. You can study the Indonesian response, immunological response to booster dose. That will be wonderful.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Usman, Prof. Haniki. Yes. I have a small question regarding adjuvant, Prof. Haniki. Is it the one that you add other components to the vaccine to make it more efficient, but the component itself is not the so to say, like not the protein, but something like inorganic, like alum? I believe alum is used as an adjuvant. Is it is adjuvant refers to that?
I'm not sure what's the actual chemicals used as
okay.
adjuvant. Maybe Prof. Usman knows better.
Oh, but it is chemical not related to the virus in a vaccine, to the virus.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so I guess that concludes the questions and answer session of today's public lecture. Thank you very much from Professor Mohamad Haniki as the main lecturer, also Prof. Usman as the lecturer for metabolism class. That concludes everything. Now, I, as a moderator, apologize if I have made any mistakes, both spoken or otherwise. I would also express my thanks for the privilege of being moderator for today's public lecture. I now return the control back to the Master of Ceremony, Valen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you to Professor Haniki for delivering a very useful and insightful knowledge for us, as well as Alif, who has guided the session really well. Next, I will give a token of gratitude in the form of a certificate to the speakers and the moderator. So the first certificate will be given to Professor Haniki as our keynote speaker in this public lecture. Thank you so much, Professor Haniki, for sharing your valuable knowledge for all of us here. So, operator, can you please take the photo?
Okay, I'm going to take a screenshot. Put on your happy face on count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The second certificate will be given to Professor Dr. Usman Sumo from Tambunan as the lecturer of the Metabolism course and the advisor of this public lecture 2022. Thank you so much, Professor Usman, for your dedication on educating us, the young generation, and guide us in preparing this event. So, operator, can you please take the photo?
Okay, hold your smile. Count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Then.
And the last certificate will be given to Muhammad Alif Abdullah as our moderator in this public lecture. Thank you so much, Alif, for guiding the session well today. And operator, can you please take the photo again?
Okay, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Then.
Thank you so much, operator. For the participants, we will send a certificate to your registered email. Okay, now that we just received a very valuable knowledge, right? So let's have a quiz. So the quiz questions will be related to the lectures. So are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Okay. Okay, for the quiz, we will use Kahoot. So please open your browser and type kahoot.it in your browser and input the code in the screen. We'll wait for 2 minutes for you guys to join the Kahoot. Okay, I already see some names here. Chan, Jovel, Pau, Windra, Gozi, who is Ang? Oh, I think this is Anggi, Daryl, and Rosita. Let's go, guys. We will wait for 1 more minute. Amazing, we already have 31 participants in this quiz and it keeps going. Let's go, guys. Okay, since it's already 2 minutes and we already have 37 participants, maybe for the committee, if you want to start the quiz. Okay, let's start. For the first question, where was COVID-19 first identified? Sydney, Australia, Wuhan, China, Jakarta, Indonesia, or Guangzhou, China? Oh, the answer goes really fast. Great, yeah, it's right, Wuhan, China. Okay, the second question. True or false? People with uncontrolled comorbidities should not be vaccinated. Oh, this is getting hard. Okay, let's see. Yep, the answer is true, guys.
Yeah.
Highlights leading. And the next question, it's a quiz again. How many cases of COVID-19 around the world so far? Wow, the answer is really fairy. Yeah, is this based on luck? Let's see. Wow, most of you guess it right. Yeah. Okay, Zalfa is leading. Okay, another true or false. For adults more than 60 years, the additional benefit of an additional booster vaccine might be warranted. Yep, the answer is true. Let's see who is leading now. It's still Zalfa, amazing. Okay, next up, true or false. Additional doses for higher priority use groups may yield lower reductions in severe disease and death. Is it true or false? 3 more questions remaining, guys. Do your best. And the answer is false. Okay, who is leading now? Still Zalfa. Wow, Zalfa. Next, true or false, the Pfizer booster dose is a half dose. Okay, this is getting easier. Yep, the answer is true. It's a half dose. And the last question. Oh, before that, let's see who is leading. Still Zalfa, amazing. Okay. The last quiz, tips to reduce risk of infection and prevent COVID-19, except cover your mouth while sneezing and coughing, avoid touching eyes, nose, and mouth, wash your hands with water and soap, or spit in public. Yes, of course, spit in public. It's prohibited. Don't do that. Okay, let's see. NJ lead the third position, Windra, the first runner-up, and the champion is Zalfa. Congratulations, Zalfa, for winning the quiz. And we have runners-up here, Pau and Pia. Great job, guys. This shows that you were paying attention so well during the lecture. And you have, sufficient knowledge about COVID-19. Well done. And that's all for the quiz. Thank you very much for all of you who has participated. Okay.
Oras.
Mas Profesor.
Daw pula na lagi adong seminar siyan luar negeri. Halo? Halo? Ya. Terbigay. Ise. Si Mape, bapak ni si Mape, mana si Mape?
Okay, next there will be a photo session. So everyone, please turn on your camera and we will wait for 1 until 2 minutes for you guys to open your camera. Okay, we will wait for 1 more minute, maybe. Yeah, I've seen beautiful and handsome faces here. Hello, guys. Okay, for the committee, you can take the picture now.
Should we wait for Prof. Usman to finish talking or just take the picture?
Oh, yeah, sure. I think he's still on call. I think I will give it back to the committee. What do you guys think?
Hello, Prof. Or maybe we can take the picture without Prof first, and then we can wait for a second picture. Fine.
Okay, sure. Let's take picture first.
Okay, put on your smile. For the camera, there are 3 pages. You do not know where you are, so keep smiling for all the pages, okay? For the first page, on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. And on the second page, 1, 2, 3. And on the last page, 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Thank you, Atala. Maybe hello, Prof. Usman.
Hello, Prof. Hello, Prof. Hello, Prof. Okay, can we start a photo section now? Because I think you have call.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start the second photo section now. We can open up camera again. Valencia, back to you.
Okay, let's take a photo session once again. Okay, I give it to Atala again.
Okay, now we take a picture with Prof. Now we have 2 pages, only 2 pages, okay? On the first page, on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, smile. On the second page, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Atala. And finally, guys, we come to the end of this event. I do apologize if there were any mistakes I made during this event. Thank you very much for your attention, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Valencia. Thank you, Prof, for coming.
Keren.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Prof.
Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
Great weekend,
Thank you,
Prof.
Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
We wouldn't made it without you, Prof.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Yeah.
Very insightful even for all of us, Prof.
Okay, thank you so